The champagne glass was still cool against my fingertips when the phone rang, slicing through what should have been the quietest, most content moment of my life. I had spent decades waiting for that stillness, but the voice on the other end made my stomach drop before the bubbles in my drink could even fade. It was my son Brandon. His tone carried that same sharp edge of privilege he'd perfected over years of never lifting more than a finger to earn anything. "Mom," he began without even a greeting, "we need to talk about the beach house." 24 hours later, I stood in the grand foyer of my new home, my sanctuary, watching a swarm of strangers drag sandy bags and flip-flops across my Italian marble floors like they owned them. My dream, the one I'd spent 3 decades building toward, was being treated like a budget hotel lobby. Let me rewind. 3 months earlier, I'd done something most people only fantasize about. I sold my company. Sterling Marketing Solutions, the business I built from scratch in my 30s, finally had a buyer. 30 years of sleepless nights, endless travel, and ruthless deadlines ended with a single wire transfer, $2.8 million, cash. After taxes and farewells, I had one goal: to disappear from the corporate storm and breathe again. So I bought the house I'd been picturing in every daydream of my career. A glass and cedar retreat perched on the dunes of the Outer Banks, overlooking the wild Atlantic. 6,000 square feet of peace, wrapped in sea breeze and silence. The first morning there, I watched the sun rise from my deck, coffee in hand, tears stinging my eyes, not from sadness, but from the terrifying realization that I was finally free. For the first time, no deadlines, no clients, no one demanding anything from me. 8 hours later, that peace shattered when Brandon called. "No, congratulations, Mom." "No, the place looks beautiful." Just a casual, commanding tone. "Mom, we'll need you to move into the guest room upstairs. Melissa's family is flying in tomorrow for a 2-week vacation. Her parents, her sister, her brother, and his girlfriend. 11 people total." I actually laughed, thinking it was a joke. "Brandon, sweetheart, this is my home. You're welcome to visit, of course, but we'll have to schedule dates." "I wasn't planning on company so soon," he sighed, the way spoiled children sigh when the world doesn't bend to their will. "You don't understand, Mom. Their flights are already booked. Melissa's parents need the master suite. You'll be fine in the guest room?" The silence between us was sharp. I could hear seagulls through the phone, and for a moment, I wished they'd carry his words back out to sea where they belonged. I'd paid for his college, covered his failed restaurant venture, even helped with his mortgage when his graphic design company nearly folded. And now my son, my only child, was demanding I surrender my home to his in-laws. "Brandon," I said quietly, "I bought this house to rest, not to run a hotel." His voice turned cold, eerily reminiscent of his father during our divorce years ago. "Mom, you've got this huge place all to yourself. It's selfish not to share. And if you're not willing to be reasonable, well, maybe it's time we looked into assisted living options for you down the coast." The words hung there like smoke from a burning bridge. He wasn't asking. He was threatening. I sat on the deck long after hanging up, watching the sun bleed gold into the ocean. The waves roared softly, but inside, I felt nothing but quiet fury. Brandon thought I'd cave. He thought I was fragile, a lonely woman in her 60s, too afraid to stand alone. He had no idea, because what I'd learned from 30 years in business was simple. You don't win by shouting. You win by letting your opponent think they already have. And that's exactly what I planned to do. By dawn the next morning, my piece was over. The rumble of engines outside pulled me from bed. Through the upstairs window, I watched a convoy of rental SUVs snake down my driveway, their tires crunching over seashell gravel. The doors opened, and out spilled Melissa's clan, loud, colorful, and entirely too comfortable for people entering someone else's home. At the front of the pack was Melissa herself, pointing and waving like a cruise director. Her parents followed, dressed in tropical prints that practically shouted, "Serve us," while her brother and sister shouted orders about luggage and rooms. I slipped into my robe and walked downstairs just in time to meet the invasion. "Oh, Mrs. Sterling," Melissa said, her surprise vanishing almost instantly into a smile of polished politeness. "Brandon mentioned you'd already moved upstairs. Good. Mom needs the ground floor suite for her knees. She can't handle stairs." Behind her, her parents strolled past me without a word, dragging suitcases straight toward my bedroom, my sanctuary. Her sister's teenagers thundered up the stairs, and her brother unfolded a sofa bed in the den like he was setting up camp. I leaned against the doorframe, forcing a calm smile. "Coffee's in the kitchen," I said. "Oh, we brought our own," Melissa chirped, already opening my pantry. "Mom's on a strict diet, the kids are picky, and we just need a little fridge space." A little apparently meant the entire refrigerator. Within minutes, my groceries were boxed up like office leftovers while she rearranged my shelves. "Where should I put these?" I asked, holding up the box of displaced food. "Garage fridge should be fine," she said breezily. "Brandon told us you had one." Of course he had. He'd practically given them a property inventory. By noon, my once immaculate house looked like a beach resort gone wrong. Wet towels draped over antique chairs, sandy footprints decorated the marble, and the air smelled of sunscreen and entitlement. Melissa's mother, Patricia, had set up camp at my dining table, loudly complaining about the water pressure in her shower. Her husband demanded the Wi-Fi password and asked if I had any cocktail umbrellas for the kids' smoothies. The audacity was almost entertaining, almost. I smiled sweetly, handed him the password, and excused myself to the garage. From there, I made the first of several quiet phone calls that would reshape everything. "Sarah," I said to my attorney, "pull the deed on my beach house. I need to confirm the ownership structure." Next, to my accountant, "Jim, remind me how we set up the purchase. Whose name is legally listed on the property?" And finally, a call to an old acquaintance, a private investigator I'd once hired for corporate acquisitions. "Mike, I need background checks on some house guests." The full package. "Yes, it's urgent." When I returned to the chaos upstairs, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses floated through the hall. They were celebrating, unaware that while they were settling in, I was quietly building my counterattack. That night, as I lay in the cramped guest room, the muffled echo of their party drifted through the floorboards. They were laughing in my living room, toasting in my kitchen, and sleeping in my bed. And yet, for the first time since Brandon's call, I smiled. Because tomorrow the real game would begin. Morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, pulling me from uneasy sleep. From downstairs came the unmistakable clatter of pans and voices. Too many voices for a house that used to echo with peace. When I entered the kitchen, it looked like a cooking show gone wrong. Melissa's mother, Patricia, commanded the room like a head chef, chopping vegetables on my marble counters while a queue of relatives waited for the coffee machine. My once serene kitchen had become a breakfast buffet. "Oh, Eleanor," Patricia said without even glancing up, "we're short on a few things. Be a dear and run to the store, won't you?" She handed me a 3-page grocery list written in bold, impatient handwriting. Items like organic oat milk, gluten-free pastries, and vegan cheese that doesn't taste fake were circled and color-coded. It took every ounce of restraint not to laugh. I looked at the list, smiled politely, and said, "Of course." They assumed I was their errand girl. Perfect. I left the house with the list in hand, but my first stop wasn't the supermarket. It was the local hardware store, then the phone company, then my bank. By the time I reached the grocery store, my cart held more than food. It held tools for the storm I was preparing to unleash. When I returned hours later, the house was louder, messier, and somehow even more occupied than before. Melissa's brother had rearranged my living room furniture to improve the view. Rachel's teenagers had discovered my art supplies and were now decorating my dining room wall with their version of ocean waves. "Oh good, you're back," Melissa said without offering to help carry the bags. "We're planning a big barbecue tomorrow night, around 30 people. Brandon's inviting some friends and business contacts. Can you pick up steaks, burgers, all the sides? I texted you the details. 30 people?" I repeated, my voice calm as ever. "Yeah, it'll be amazing. We'll finally put this place on the map. Brandon says it's perfect for networking." So that was it. They wanted to turn my home into a venue for his social climbing. I looked around at my disheveled living room. The pool toys floating outside. The faint smell of someone's cheap sunscreen hanging in the air. It was the kind of chaos money couldn't buy. And soon, they'd realize how costly it could become. That evening, as the sun dipped into the horizon, I slipped back into the garage and dialed another number from memory. "Tom, it's Eleanor Sterling," I said when the familiar voice answered. "Yes, I know it's been years since we worked together. I need a favor, a catering setup last minute. 30 guests tomorrow night, full luxury menu. And Tom," I paused, smiling at the thought of Brandon's face when he saw the bill. "Spare no expense." I ended the call and leaned against the wall, listening to the faint sounds of laughter drifting from the deck. They thought tomorrow's party would be their triumph, a celebration of their entitlement. But by this time tomorrow, it would be my stage, and I would take back everything. Not by shouting, not by fighting, but by letting them dig their own hole, one glass of champagne at a time. The next morning, the air buzzed with activity. I watched from the upstairs balcony as Melissa's family scurried, about like worker bees, stringing up lights, dragging out furniture, barking orders, and playing host in a house that wasn't theirs. They'd invited nearly half the beach community. I overheard talk of influential guests, networking opportunities, and showcasing the property. My property. By noon, my kitchen looked like a war zone of food prep. Patricia complained about the placement of every utensil while Melissa reorganized my cupboards for efficiency. It would have been impressive if it weren't so infuriating. Then, just before lunch, I heard Brandon's voice from the driveway, confident, booming, already in performance mode. He'd arrived with even more people, friends, colleagues, a few faces I didn't recognize. I peeked through the window as he handed out my spare house keys like party favors. "Mom!" he called out when he saw me. "Hope you're ready for a real event. Big names tonight. This could open doors for me. Think of it as a family investment. A family investment. In my house." I smiled thinly. "How exciting," I said, and retreated upstairs. While they buzzed around preparing for their grand event, I slipped into the quiet of my room. On my bed lay the dress I hadn't worn since my retirement gala. Sleek black silk, understated and sharp, a statement piece, not of vanity but of authority. If you're going to take back your dignity, you might as well look magnificent doing it. As the sun fell and lanterns lit up the deck, the driveway filled with luxury cars. Mercedes, BMWs, Teslas, the kind of guests Brandon wanted to impress. Laughter and music spilled from the open doors, the air thick with expensive perfume and entitlement. Melissa had truly transformed my home. Family portraits replaced with abstract art, my grandmother's, quilts turned into boho throws, and my lifetime of memories tucked away in boxes labeled clutter. I watched from the top of the stairs for a moment, observing them glide through my home, confident and oblivious. Brandon, glass in hand, was telling a group of well-dressed strangers about his family property and his plans to turn it into an event retreat. "Mom's just enjoying her golden years," he added casually. "I handle most of the management now." The words hit me like a slap, and then made me smile. Because tonight, those same words would hang him. At exactly 6, the sound of an engine echoed outside, deep, professional, and commanding. Heads turned as a sleek catering truck rolled into the driveway, lights gleaming. Melissa frowned. "What's this?" "Oh," I said brightly, stepping onto the deck. "That's dinner." The logo on the side read, "Morrison Elite Events, the most exclusive caterer on the coast." Their staff moved with precision, setting up tables, champagne towers, and a full mobile kitchen. "Ms. Sterling," the head caterer greeted me warmly, clipboard in hand. "Where would you like the champagne service?" Brandon's face went pale. "Champagne service?" "Yes, dear," I said sweetly. "We can't serve backyard burgers to distinguished guests, can we? I thought we'd elevate the evening. Prime rib, lobster tails, Dom Perignon, the best." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Guests perked up, impressed. Melissa tried to smile, but it looked strained. "Mom, we already—" "Relax, sweetheart," I interrupted gently. "Everything's taken care of." As the catering team transformed the deck into a high-end dining experience, Brandon's expression shifted from confusion to panic. I could almost see the numbers spinning behind his eyes. He pulled me aside, voice low. "Mom, what's this going to cost?" I met his gaze, serene. "Don't worry, darling. You said you were managing things now." Then I raised my glass to the crowd and smiled. "To family," I said, "and to beautiful beginnings." They all cheered. None of them knew that the real celebration hadn't even started yet. By the time the moon rose over the ocean, the party was in full swing. Laughter echoed through the house, champagne overflowed, and the smell of grilled lobster mixed with the salt air. The lights reflected off the pool like scattered diamonds, a picture of perfection. Except perfection, as I knew too well, always comes with a price tag. Brandon had tried to stay calm all evening, smiling tightly whenever someone mentioned the incredible catering. Every compliment twisted the knife a little deeper. I could see the sweat, forming at his temple each time another bottle of champagne was opened. By dessert, he could barely hold his composure. "Mom," he whispered sharply as guests toasted around us, "tell me this is covered." "Oh, absolutely," I replied softly. "Everything's in your name after all. The invoices went straight to your new house. Management account. You did say you were handling the finances. Didn't you?" The blood drained from his face. Across the room, Melissa froze mid-laugh as the head caterer approached her with a clipboard. "Mrs. Sterling, if you could just sign off here for the catering total $72,000, plus gratuity. Would you prefer we invoice the business or the residents?" The silence that followed was delicious. You could feel it ripple through the air like static. "$72,000, Brandon stammered. "That can't be." "Oh, it can," I said lightly, sipping my wine. "You said you wanted to put this place on the map. Consider it done." He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, I turned to the guests and raised my glass once more. "I'd like to make an announcement." I said, "You may know this home as the Sterling Estate. It was built by my late husband and myself, and for decades it stood as a symbol of family. But recently I realized family isn't about shared blood or shared space. It's about shared respect." The crowd hushed. Brandon's jaw tightened. Melissa's smile cracked like glass. So I continued, "I've decided to make a small change. This property has just been transferred into the Sterling Trust Foundation effective yesterday. It will no longer be used for private events or personal gain. It's going to serve as a coastal retreat for single mothers and women rebuilding their lives." Gasps filled the air. The guests turned to Brandon, his face now completely drained of color. You did what," he sputtered. I looked him in the eye. "You wanted to manage things, darling. Now you won't have to. It's all taken care of." A ripple of applause began from one of the guests, then spread through. The crowd polite, respectful, even admiring. Brandon just stood there, frozen in disbelief, while Melissa tried to keep her composure in front of everyone. When the last car finally drove away, the house fell silent again for the first time in months. I walked through the quiet halls, past the fading smell of champagne and candle wax, and out to the deck. The ocean shimmered softly under the moonlight. I sat down, exhaled, and let the night air fill my lungs. For the first time in a long while, it felt like my home again, not because I owned it, but because I had reclaimed my peace. Sometimes revenge isn't about destruction, it's about restoration, taking back what was stolen without ever raising your voice. And as I watched the tide wash away the footprints from the night's chaos, I smiled. They thought they'd written me out of my own story. But I